There are moments in life that crack you open so completely that the person who crawls out the other side barely recognizes themselves. I was 32 years old, standing in a grocery store parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon when my heart decided it was done cooperating. It wasn't dramatic the way movies make it look. No clutching my chest, no slow motion collapse. 1 second I was reaching for my keys, and the next I was face down on hot asphalt, my body having entered ventricular fibrillation, which is the medical way of saying my heart had stopped doing its job and started doing something closer to jazz improvisation. A stranger, a nurse, by pure coincidence, performed CPR for 4 minutes before the paramedics arrived. 4 minutes is both nothing and forever when it is the margin between existing and not. The hospital told me later that my survival odds in that parking lot were somewhere around 8%. 8% is the kind of number that rearranges furniture inside your brain permanently. Now, here is where the story gets strange, because I did not have the peaceful tunnel of light experience you read about in best-selling memoirs. What I had was more like a very long, very boring darkness, followed by the most violent inhale of my life and a nurse screaming, "He's back," like I had just returned from a road trip. The medical aftermath was its own education, a defibrillator implanted in my chest, beta blockers for the foreseeable future, and a cardiologist who spoke to me the way teachers speak to students who almost failed but technically didn't. My heart had a previously undetected condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is essentially your heart muscle growing too thick for its own good, a biological overachiever causing chaos. What nobody prepares you for is the emotional whiplash of surviving something statistically unlikely. You would think the dominant feeling would be gratitude, and it is. But it shares real estate with something more unsettling, a kind of vertigo that comes from realizing how thin the membrane between your life and its absence actually is. I remember sitting in my car, in my own driveway, 3 weeks after discharge, unable to go inside, just staring at the steering wheel like it owed me an explanation. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth, which is the research-backed phenomenon where confronting mortality can actually accelerate psychological development. But in the early days, it just feels like being emotionally disassembled with no instruction manual for putting yourself back together. The behavioral changes came fast, and then slow, and then permanently. Within the first month, I quit a job I had been quietly miserable in for 6 years. Not out of impulsiveness, but out of a sudden and irrevocable clarity that I had been spending enormous energy pretending mediocrity felt acceptable. Here's the part that surprises people. I did not become reckless. Near-death experiences are often portrayed in culture as permission slips for chaos, quit everything, buy a motorcycle, move to Bali. But what mine actually produced was a profound preference for intention over impulse, which is almost the opposite of what the movies promised. My relationship with time shifted in a way that is genuinely difficult to articulate without sounding like a motivational poster. The closest I can get is this. Before, time felt like a resource I was managing. After, it felt like a current I was either swimming with or against. And the difference between those two framings changed nearly every decision I made. I became almost allergic to conversations I didn't mean, commitments I was making out of social obligation, and the particular kind of low-grade dishonesty where you say you're fine when you aren't. My close relationships became fewer and significantly realer, which is a trade I would make again without hesitation. On the belief side, I want to be careful here, because I know how easy it is for survival narratives to drift into soft spirituality that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. What I can say with precision is that I stopped being certain about things I was never actually certain about. And that uncertainty, paradoxically, made me calmer rather than more anxious. The irony that is genuinely hard to shake is this. I had spent years optimizing my life in ways that were largely performative. The right job title, the right trajectory, the right answers at dinner parties, and it took my heart literally malfunctioning in a parking lot to surface the obvious truth that I hadn't asked myself what I actually wanted in probably a decade. Practically speaking, the lifestyle changes look almost boring from the outside. I sleep 8 hours with a consistency that borders on religious. I have not had a drink in 2 years. I exercise in ways that my cardiologist approves of and my ego has had to make peace with. And I have a therapist I see every 2 weeks who I am fairly convinced has kept me more honest than I would otherwise manage. The deeper lesson, and I say this as someone who is skeptical of tidy lessons, is that urgency and presence are not things you can think your way into. They require, it turns out, something that actually gets your attention. And for better or worse, a heart that stops in a parking lot qualifies. What I carry now is not the fear of dying, which is what most people assume must dominate my inner life. It is something quieter and more useful, a recurring, low-level awareness that today has weight, that the ordinary Tuesday you are currently inside of is the one you will eventually have wished you paid more attention to. If this story landed somewhere useful for you, subscribe and go explore everything else we have made. There is a lot more worth your time.